Summertime is a dramatic season of growth in the garden. It's also when my lemons, limes, and oranges develop their amazing fruits. Over the last 12 years, I've grown my collection to 20 trees, and I've developed a keen understanding of their unique needs throughout the summertime. Diagnosing citrus fruit damage properly, learning how to water citrus trees, and understanding why citrus fruit fall off are just a few of my key takeaways. Here I'm sharing 7 summer citrus tips you should know. What's up everyone, it's Scott from New Garden Road, always out here to inform, inspire, and elevate you. Encouraging biodiversity and restoring habitat is my mission, one garden at a time. Here's tip number 1, feed your citrus trees. Use a fertilizer higher in nitrogen and feed them regularly throughout the growing season. Their evergreen leaves and dense fruit require steady nutrients. Choosing the right fertilizer for your citrus trees may seem counterintuitive. When you want to grow flowers and fruits in the garden, you typically target a fertilizer that's higher in phosphorus. But that's not what you need for citrus fruits. You can go with a fairly basic single element fertilizer such as cottonseed meal. Likewise, you can use something like the Sustain brand 824. Both of those, the first number corresponds to the nitrogen content, and that's going to be sufficient for the needs of your citrus trees. You can choose a combination fertilizer that has some trace nutrients in there. These typically contain a broad range of things that are good for citrus trees, and they're going to be higher in nitrogen as well. Here's tip number 2, utilize liquid seaweed. Seaweed supports resiliency in plants, and it plays a role in stress relief. It's loaded with chelated nutrients, organic acids, and nutrients for beneficial microbes. I really enjoy applying liquid seaweed as a foliar application weekly. It's important to do really early in the morning before the heat of the day sets in, and so that the seaweed has time to dry on the leaves before the sun gets high in the sky. Likewise, you could use it as a soil drench. Here's tip number 3, protect your citrus trees from sunburn. Prolonged exposure to extreme UV rays, such as we get in the summer, can cause some yellowing and browning on your citrus leaves. Likewise, you can also get some sun scald on your fruits. You may have seen this on peppers or tomatoes in the garden, but the same thing can happen to citrus fruits. We had an extremely hot summer here in Austin, and as my citrus trees grew new leaves, I noticed a few of them got burned pretty significantly, so that new growth just shriveled up and got really crispy. So you may or may not have some limitations regarding where you put your citrus trees in your garden, and certainly if you've got them planted in the ground, that's already a set thing. But think about the early morning sun. Sun exposure for the first half of the day is going to be ideal. As the sun sets in the southwest, you get a little bit more extreme in terms of the sun's rays, and those are the ones that have the most potential risk for damaging your citrus leaves. And I also don't want to skip over the tree bark. That can get damaged just like the leaves. If you've got full sun in the garden, you may have to make some adjustments. You're really just going to have to look out for them. I would definitely lean into the seaweed that can help them in this case, but also you may need to employ some shade structures. I really like to utilize 40% shade cloth for all day coverage when I need to protect plants from the sun. You could use a 60% shade cloth for increased coverage if you've got a highly reflective surface such as your house or some pavement, or if your tree is simply exposed to the southwest and is getting a lot of those extreme UV rays, you could build a baffle of some sort to break that. Tip number 4, understand the importance of regular pruning on your citrus trees. As your tree grows vigorously throughout the summer, you need to tip it for shape, and this simply requires that you periodically take some time to step back, observe the profile of your citrus tree. As it grows some of these shoots and they get a little bit long, you can tip them back, generally in the order of 6 to 8 inches. An ideal shape for a citrus tree is more like a shrub. You don't necessarily have to prune it back so that it looks like a lollipop. If we go back to the point about sun protection, having some lower branches and leaves is highly beneficial as protecting the bark on your tree and any developing fruit. But regardless, just make it a consistent practice. They're actively growing throughout the summer, so if you're pruning them regularly, they're going to continue to grow. They will respond, and this will promote an overall better balance in the structure of your tree. More branching could lead to more fruiting, and as those branches develop and get stronger over time, they'll be better suited for holding the weight of any developing fruit. It's also not uncommon that you'll see rootstock suckers. Essentially, most trees are grafted. You've got a fruiting scion that's grafted onto a rootstock. The rootstock is not a fruiting variety, but below that graft point throughout the growing season, you can see some shoots emerge. One thing that's important to note is that the foliage will often look different from the tree that you're growing for fruit. A lot of times it's a trifoliate leaf pattern. It can be extra spiny. Citrus trees can have spines in general, but if you've got a spineless tree and you see one of these shoots coming from low on the tree and it's got spines, then it's likely a rootstock sucker. These are going to be utilizing the same nutrients that are available to the tree overall, and you don't want them to go there. They're not going to set fruit for you. It's not what you want to grow. So prune them out, make good clean cuts against the base of the tree so that it's able to heal over in time, and don't allow them to get developed and hog nutrients from your fruit. And as I mentioned earlier, new growth can be more predisposed to sunburn. That's because it really hasn't had a chance to harden off and get tougher. A lot of times these newly formed branches and leaves will be really droopy at first, especially during the heat of the day. You might be seeing that and wondering if you need to take some action. Give them some time, give them a couple of weeks before you make a decision on pruning them. Let them harden off and see which direction they really end up heading in. Here's tip number 5. Learn how to water citrus trees. Deeper and less frequent watering is essential. Citrus tree roots like to breathe, so they need some time to dry out in between waterings. You don't want to keep the soil soggy because that will begin to rot those roots. Container grown trees may be a little bit more tricky because they have a finite amount of soil and roots, but generally throughout the hottest part of summer, I'll water my citrus trees roughly 3 times a week, making several passes with my water wand. Likewise, you can set up some drip irrigation. A nice slow deep soaking would be ideal. And for reference, all of my container grown citrus trees are growing in 16 to 18 inch terracotta pots. Here's tip number 6. Understand how to interpret your citrus fruit damage. When it comes to damage on my citrus trees, whether it's the fruit or the branching, birds have been the usual suspects. Here in Austin, it's typically the boat-tailed grackle. They just love citrus. Once things really warm up in the summertime, they like the citrus oil for preening their feathers. I think that helps them deal with some of the pest-related issues of the warm season. Some of those grackles are a pretty good size, and their weight can be too much for a small limb. A lot of times I'll have some broken limbs as a result. And when these birds peck at the fruit, over time that will start to mold and it'll look like you've got some kind of fungus or disease on your fruit, but it may simply be bird damage. So if you're looking for a remedy for bird damage on your citrus fruit or your trees in general, it can be tricky. The first option we often talk about is bird netting, but I don't really like bird netting. I don't often recommend it unless it's an extreme case and you're very careful in your application. It's just gnarly to deal with. It's not fun to deal with at all. It's very see-through. I think it works well as a physical barrier, but I also think that it can pose a risk to beneficial animals in our garden ecosystem. Scare tape is another thing that I've tried in the past, and I've utilized some stakes and an array. I've draped it from one tree to the next. But the thing is, birds are smart. You know, they didn't survive from dinosaurs with no brains. They can get used to this stuff. They'll observe it at first and they might be a little bit thrown off. The mylar surface of scare tape is designed to refract light, and initially this will throw birds off. They're just not sure if it's safe to approach the tree. But over the course of time, they'll figure it out, they'll get used to it, and it won't bother them one bit. But that's just been my experience. One option that I've found successful so far this season is the use of nylon bags. These are roughly 8 inch by 11 inches, and I utilize them to protect individual fruits or clusters of small fruits altogether. I'll loosely tie a knot on the tree so that it's not causing any impediments to the growth or development of the fruit, and this will keep them in place should we get some storms or some high winds. So this works just like bird netting, only you don't pose a risk to beneficial animals, and it protects your fruit. I will say that it can be a bit laborious. Just as I was describing to you, I like to apply SEAWEED as a foliar application, but what I've been doing is removing the individual bags prior to that application. It takes a little bit of time, but I don't really mind because I'm invested in doing the best thing for my garden ecosystem. Here's tip number 7. Let's talk about why citrus fruit fall off. There are several key time frames throughout the growing season that you may observe some of your citrus falling off the tree. Number 1 is what we call post-bloom drop. Healthy citrus trees can produce hundreds of flowers, and if all of those flowers set fruit, they simply don't have the resources to bring them to maturity. After initial fruit set, fruit will drop as the tree balances its capacity. So the tree knows what it can handle, and it will drop some of those fruit accordingly. And similarly, it's not unusual to see a second wave summer drop. And again, this is about competition for resources and the tree balancing itself out. But it could also have to do with moisture deficits and high temperatures. So you need to keep things in balance for your tree overall, and if that's the case, and you think your tree is overall healthy, don't be alarmed. It's just doing what it needs to do. And then later in the season, we can see premature and pre-harvest drop. And this can be the result of disease, extreme temperatures, or moisture stress. I also want to throw in an observation here. I've noticed that when birds damage a developing fruit, a lot of times that fruit will go on to drop off the tree. I think if it's damaged badly enough, the tree can recognize it, there's signals there, and it's again prioritizing its resources to other fruits. So some of those seasonal elements that you might not be able to control will play a role in your citrus dropping fruit later in the season. Just do everything you can to grow a happy tree, follow all these tips, and you'll be enjoying your own homegrown fruit before you know it. Okay, we rolling? The sweat is setting in. Oh, great. Maybe it's all the responsibilities of life. I'm not a meteorologist. I tell you what, I like a little lemon juice in my water. That's nice. Now check out more awesome gardening videos on my channel. Like this video and follow New Garden Road for weekly content. You can grow your own amazing citrus fruit. Keep it organic. I hope that was good.